Welcome to The Breakdown with INFB. I'm your host, Heidi Gant. On today's episode, we're talking policy. Advocating for agriculture is a pillar of Indiana Farm Bureau membership, and our staff is constantly on the move, making sure local, state, and federal policies are beneficial and not burdensome to farmers in rural communities. So today we brought two of our policy experts on the podcast to give us a rundown of what to expect in the coming months and how members can get involved. So Brantley Seifers is the Director of National Affairs for Indiana Farm Bureau, and Ryan Hoff is the Senior Director of Government Affairs, focusing mostly on state issues. Brantley and Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Okay, Ryan, we'll start with you. In Indiana, every other year is a budget year for the state legislature. And I'm sure that comes into play in what your strategy is, your team is kind of talking about now, what legislation or policies that you really want to focus on in the coming year. Can you talk about some of that and how that comes into play?
Yeah, so the long legislative session is very often a unique animal. Not only because they're adopting the state budget, of course. I mean, there will be Farm Bureau policy goals that we have within the state budget where the state is going to be spending dollars on this issue, that issue. But in addition to the state budget, because there's the 6 extra weeks, the legislature very often will take up more complex, complicated policy issues because they have 6 extra weeks to work on it. The budget writers will be doing their thing, but that gives everyone, all the other legislators, 6 extra weeks as well. And so they pick up the weightier issues in a budget year typically.
And speaking of weightier issues, taxes, property taxes, yeah. I feel like that's a pretty weighty issue. So why don't we kind of take a look back a little bit first, and let's talk about 2025. There was a pretty significant overhaul of the tax system, property tax system. Can you talk about why that came into play? What kind of went into that, and where do we go from here? How does that impact the coming year?
Yeah, so within the 2025 tax reforms, there were a few different things going on. And for part of that, you got to go all the way back 50 years ago when the Bowen tax reforms happened and kind of put into place the levy system that we have had for decades now. And recognizing that local income taxes, since they were implemented a few decades ago, have been distributed on the same breakdown as property taxes according to the levy system. And so you have situations where one unit may be getting a lot more revenue out of local income taxes than residents in that jurisdiction are putting into the countywide pot, because the levy distribution system is still being used. Now, part of the 2025 tax reform was to change that fundamental distribution system. So the only local income tax revenue that will be received by each jurisdiction is what's generated by their elected officials on taxpayers within that jurisdiction. So of course there will remain the possibility of a county-wide rate, but also each city and town is now empowered to have their own local income tax rate that will stack on top of the county-wide rate. So the county-wide rate, a bucket of that is only for county expenses. There are other pieces of it where the county is adopting local income tax rates for other units who do not have authority to adopt their own rate. And then you will have cities and towns who have authority to adopt an income tax rate just on their residents. So we're moving away from the levy-based distribution model for local income taxes. And I think partly that goes back to the property tax distribution model. But it's also a fairness question, because if I live outside a city or town, and yet a lot of my tax dollars are going to and being spent by local officials that I don't get to vote for, there's a taxpayer fairness issue there. And so structurally, it probably makes more sense to go this direction where it's more transparent for taxpayers to know who is raising my local income tax and why, and making sure that the revenue is going to the jurisdictions that you are involved with, that you are expecting to receive services from.
Okay, so a lot is happening in the counties. I think people are still kind of figuring that out, right? So
Yes. This new local income tax system goes into effect in 2029.
right. So are you, I've heard you kind of been going out and doing some info sessions like this with our members so they can understand, because obviously it impacts every local area a little bit differently. What do members need to know about some of these changes, and are there things that they need to be aware of that they need to be advocating for or looking out for in their areas?
Well, if you have service units that are particularly important to you and you want to make sure that that service unit continues to receive funding, especially if it's one of the units that is now under the purview of the county fiscal body, the county council, to provide funding to, libraries, townships, other non-municipal jurisdictions are eligible to receive local income tax dollars if the county council adopts a rate for that type of unit, not including schools. So that's different. But under the current or the old system, in some counties, some schools got a little bit of local income tax dollars. In other counties, it didn't. It just goes back to whenever that particular county adopted their first local income tax rate. Were they under the old CAGIT framework, or were they under the old COET framework? All of those silos or frameworks have been broken down into just local income tax and restructured so that the county council is more in control of the countywide rate, and with various distributions possible within that, and then city officials for the first time are responsible for their own local income tax rate.
Okay, so let's talk about another issue that's been pretty popular among our members here lately, and that's property tax assessments. I think there was some sticker shock in people's mailboxes in the past month. Can you kind of talk about why some people's property tax assessments have gone up quite significantly and what they can do about that?
Yeah, so of course the Form 11s that inform you of what your new property tax assessment is went out in the past few weeks. In a lot of cases showing a large jump in your assessment. The reason for that is largely based in the updated cost tables that the state uses, the state adopts, that each county assessor has to use when creating your assessment. And this is the first update to the cost manuals post-COVID inflation that really reflects the big jump in materials that go into costs of any building, because your assessment is cost of recreating that structure minus depreciation. And so because it's based on what it costs to rebuild, of course, any jump in the cost of steel, the cost of shingles, the cost of whatever the material is, almost all of them have increased since COVID, of course. And so that's primarily the reason why assessments have jumped. Now, there are things you can do having received a higher assessment. The number one thing to keep in mind is that the deadline for the formal appeal of your property valuation is June 15th. So I know this podcast will be going out just a week or two in advance of that.
Yep.
So as people are listening, remember June 15th is the deadline to formally appeal your valuation. Talk with your assessor, understand what your assessment is, make sure your property record card is correct for what type of structures that you have on your property. There are some county assessors will want to hear from you in advance of the formal appeal process. Some want you to file the formal appeal first, but always to protect yourself, making sure by June 15th you've filed that appeal, and then you can continue to work on it after that. But you got to have it done by June 15th.
Clock's ticking. So let's talk a little bit about, I know legislative session doesn't start till January, but you all are having those conversations with legislators now, right? Are there any specific goals or legislation that you think have legs at this point? Or are you still kind of chatting through any specific things?
Yeah, particular to the rise in assessments this year, we are going to be asking that ag structures move from the 3% property tax cap class to the 2% class. Now, not only would that, if the legislature were to enact that change, not only would that lower your property tax cap on your property, it would also bring in a 1/3 deduction of your assessed value by the time the 2025 property tax reforms are in place, because that was in addition to the lit changes that we just discussed. Part of it is also providing a series of new property tax deductions for various classes of property. 1% properties, homesteads, will be receiving a 2/3 deduction by the time this all phases in 2030. So they'll be getting a 2/3 deduction. If you have a 2% property tax cap class property, ag land, for example, is 2%, we'll be getting a 1/3 deduction of assessed value by the time it phases in. And if the legislature makes this change, ag buildings would also get that 1/3 deduction of assessed value. Again, it's, ramping up between now and 2030. It's rolling in, but that would be fully enacted for 2030.
Great. And then I'll come back to you in a little bit to kind of talk about some action steps for all of that. But already, I'm glad we have brains like you that deal with stuff like that, because
it's complex.
You don't want me, yeah. We're very happy to have Ryan on staff. All right, Brantley, let's move on to federal issues. A lot going on in DC right now, not just for farmers, but everyone. But let's talk about some of those issues that are impacting farmers this year. Farm bill, where are we at with that? Are we finally going to get one passed this year? What's coming up?
Yeah, well, my crystal ball's in the shop still, but we have seen some movement. So Farm Bill passed the House a couple weeks ago, which is a huge victory for us and our members, a big first step into getting it signed into law, which we've been asking for a number of years now. Long time. So really positive movement, a bipartisan bill. So everybody kind of remembers the One Big Beautiful Bill had a majority of the Farm Bill in it. So we did get a majority of what we see as a traditional Farm Bill programs done last Congress, or last year. But this is the remaining about 20% of the Farm Bill. Still a lot of really important sections in that Farm Bill that need to get through and need to be updated for our members. Some big wins, a fix to Prop 12 out of California was in this Farm Bill. A lot of the rural development, the research programs, the loan programs for beginning and new farmers, all in this Farm Bill. So it's not as flashy as some of the bigger ticket items in the Farm Bill that passed last year, but still really important. So getting that through Congress in a bipartisan way, or through the House in a bipartisan way, is really great momentum going forward to the Senate.
So have you heard any inklings of what's going on in the Senate right now? Any thought of a timeline of when that's going to happen?
Yeah, they're taking their time. I think if you're, going out there Googling what they're saying, they'll say, before August recess, which is a big kind of stretch where they get to do a lot of different bills before they leave for August, come back in September. When you come back in September, things starts snowballing very quickly, and that's kind of where we see some of the government shutdowns, or the bigger ticket bills that have to get passed by the end of the year, get the focus. So if it's not done before August recess, it's more difficult to get done. But from what we're hearing, they are moving slower in the Senate on their version. There's some disagreement on, are they going to take up the House version and kind of move that forward and make some modifications, or are they going to start from scratch? Oftentimes we see them kind of start from scratch and take their own bill up, and then the House and Senate convene in conference and kind of shake out what they think is going to be a farm bill that can actually pass both the House and the Senate. So we're just hopeful that they actually take those steps before August recess. That'd be our goal. But again, just the momentum from the House, it gives them something to start with, gives them some priorities where they can see what passed the House, what didn't pass the House, and kind of move forward from there.
And we like what passed in the House, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then so talk about if they aren't able to get it done before August recess, there's a deadline, right? Before they have to.
That's correct. We've hit that deadline at the end of September a number of years now, so it gets extended by the end of the year, has traditionally. Obviously, we want to make sure that it doesn't get extended another year, but yes, they do have the means to keep kicking that can down the road if they want to. So
okay, so the other issue that has passed the House and is now in Senate hands year-round E15.
Yep.
Talk about the priority that why that's so important to our members and kind of what's that timeline too.
Yeah, another big win for the House. The House really stepped up and got some things passed, so we're really happy with that. E15 is something that we've been fighting for a long time. It's been one where we've seen it on the 1 yard line a few times in the past couple months, actually, and it's gotten pulled at the last second. So this is another one where it was actually a part of that House Farm Bill, was pulled at the last second again, and we thought, this was a Charlie Brown incident where we're kicking the football. But no, the House, with a lot of Midwest legislators that said, hey, we have to get it done this time, came back a couple weeks later and passed the year-round E15 as a standalone bill, which is really great as well. Now, again, off to the Senate and hopeful that they will pick it up. Whether it's a part of the Farm Bill or not, I think is yet to be seen, but just the fact that it got passed and it has a way to move forward is great. And this really brings some certainty to E15 and year-round E15 that we haven't seen in the market. Gives both the farmer, but also if you're going to the gas station and you're looking for that pump, you can see it more frequently because it gives the certainty for the seller to also invest and make those investments. So right now, our members obviously really hyper-focused on E15 and are very aware of it and its positives. I would say that the average consumer probably doesn't know as much.
Right.
And so without that certainty, there's not that really need for investment or need for the consumer to kind of educate on this. So getting this signed into law, that long-term certainty, we can really see the direction that will go for the entire industry. So again, a big win for Congress trying to keep that momentum going up.
So in talk, our two senators are pretty ag friendly, right?
Yep,
so
absolutely.
that I was going to talk about next steps now that it is in the Senate.
Yep.
But we still want members to be talking to our senators, right, about what's important.
Yep, that's right. I would say first thing would be to thank your member of Congress, especially if they were for the Farm Bill in Indiana. This was a partisan vote, so if you were a Republican member of Congress, they voted for it. If it was a Democrat, they voted against it. Same is true for E15. However, Congressman Mervan in CD1 did vote for it as well, so thank him for that as well.
Yeah.
It's very rare that we get to thank our members of Congress for getting things passed, and most of the time when they hear from us, we're wanting a Farm Bill, we're wanting E15. So this is a great opportunity to thank them for that support. Very friendly delegation from Indiana. And then when you move to the Senate, same thing we've been saying, but now the ball's in their court, right?
Yeah.
So they have to keep consistent with those talking points. We have been very strong on these issues with them, so they're very aware of what our priorities are. And like you said, they're great on ag issues as well. The struggle is Indiana right now does not have a member on Senate Ag Committee, first time since the 70s. However, we do have two great representatives over in the Senate to represent agriculture. So they get it. They understand our needs there. It's just making sure that we keep on and they keep on leadership to actually get this passed.
Yeah. So before we move on to maybe some other action steps, real quick, labor, I know, is a big issue for a lot of our members, especially our specialty crop growers. Can you talk about maybe some movement that's happening there or some issues that we're focusing on advocating for?
Yeah, ag labor actually got an update as well. This is from the administration, not from Congress. And so end of last year, there was a final rule that was submitted that would basically overhaul how the adverse effect wage rate or the wage rate for H-2A labor was done. Indiana traditionally had been one of the highest states for ag labor in the country. And if you look at us in California and Florida and some of the other states where it might make more sense, you'd say, why is Indiana on that list, right? This overall has done a lot to really break up that wage rate, bring us down so we're kind of more in line with other Midwest states. And what it did really well was it kind of tiered out those positions for H-2A. So you have a higher tier now, which still has their certificates, the leadership, the experience that you want in those higher duty skills and jobs. We still pay those a pretty high rate compared to the rest of the state or the rest of the country. But that lower rate really brought that down for our members. It was implemented this year, and I think they're really seeing the benefit of a lower rate because that rate consistently jumping $1 or more year after year for 5 years in a row has really put strain on our specialty crop growers, our melon growers down south, tomatoes and other things up north. So now we're seeing that new system in place has really benefited them and is a system that I think makes more sense nationwide and brings us kind of in line with our neighbors.
Yeah, and I've heard from several of these specialty crop growers that it's labor that's essential for getting their crop to market, because they've offered these jobs to local areas, but a lot of times in rural communities, there's just not anybody for these jobs. So they, I know how much they appreciate the H-2A labor program for these people.
That's
so.
right.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about how our members can get involved in advocating for agriculture. Ryan, starting with you. Obviously, we have several months until legislative session starts, but what can people do now that can help advocate for the legislation that we're going to be pushing for?
As always, talking to your legislators about what's going on your farm is the number one thing. If they have a better understanding of the operations that you as a farmer have, that's key. Looking specifically at proposals, moving from the 3% property class to 2% will be a big ask for next session. But just keeping in contact with them about what's happening in the farm economy, because it changes pretty often, and legislators will already be thinking about what legislation they want to offer in January. So it's never too early to start talking about the things that are on your mind, updating on what's happening within the farm economy, being active in our policy process. Indiana Farm Bureau is a big part of that. And then when we have events around the state, participating in those. I've been going out and talking with various counties either about the property tax reform or about data centers has been a big topic of conversation, and I've been asked to come out and talk generally about what a data center is and what are the tax impacts and land use and how all of these water, energy, how all these things fit together. And so participate in Indiana Farm Bureau, come to the meetings that are on offer. But again, always circling back to your area legislators, good and bad, as Brentley said, take the opportunity to thank them when it's appropriate, so that's not all just negative. We need something. They appreciate hearing the good feedback as well.
And I think also, wouldn't you say it's helpful to give them exact numbers, like my property taxes went up this much, or this is what it costs to plant a field of corn, or think like very specific numbers, give them good feedback that they can then bring back to the legislature. It's not just anecdotal. It's like, here are the facts.
Yeah. So when the issue comes up in legislative committee, they can comment to the rest of the legislators. I heard from my constituent their ag input price on X, Y, and Z went up 200% this year.
Right.
That's valuable. That definitely moves the needle during legislative session.
Right. And then also, you had mentioned the data center program. That's our virtual program that's on June 24th for our members. So sign up for that. That'll be a really informative session. I think a lot of people have been asking for. So looking forward to that. Brantley, on the federal side of things, talk about how people can get involved. Specifically, August recess is a really great opportunity to do that. What can people do?
Yeah, absolutely. So August recess, kind of like you mentioned, is our opportunity to get our Indiana delegation back in the state. Usually during that time, they're trying to meet with constituents. And so we've done a really good job in the past at really bringing them to the farm, bringing the members to them, and having a bigger dialogue around the issues important to us. It's a way for our members, they don't have to travel to D.C. to get in front of their member of Congress. And kind of like Ryan said, they'd love to come out to the farm. They'd love to get a farm tour. They love to hear specifics about the farm. They'll bring that back to D.C., and this is our opportunity. So we'll be reaching out to each of our members in our delegation, trying to get them on a farm somewhere in their district. And so these are our larger events. So if you are comfortable talking to a member of Congress, awesome, we want you there. And if you're not as comfortable, if this is the first time you've thought about doing this, it's a really good way to, it's not a small group, it's not a small table. You can really be a part of the larger crowd and kind of see what one of these events looks like. And if you want to ask a question, you can. Oftentimes there's some time at the end to get some one-on-one time, and the legislator will walk around the room a little bit. So we really try to bring as many of our members together on these opportunities as possible, get them in front of our members of Congress. So that's coming in August. Your regional manager will be reaching out to you, your county board to get more information out of there. It's something that we always like to do. You'll see me beforehand telling you about the issues that we're working on in DC, so it's not like you have to go into that meeting with no kind of context or background. So it really is something that we try to let our members have that opportunity when they can in August. So smaller than or bigger than maybe what Ryan's doing, but because it's a larger district, we're trying to get as many people as there as possible.
And really, even though our congressmen and women seem untouchable, or like they're in DC, I can't really talk to them, when they're at these events, I've been to several of them. They really do want to know what you're thinking. They want to hear from these people. So if you go, just know that your opinion's valued. They want to hear your issues and what you're dealing with.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
That's always, I thought that was really great to see, to feel like they genuinely want to hear from their constituents.
Yep.
So. Well, good. Okay, couple things listeners can go to for more information. Website, we try to keep that up to date with some of the issues that we're dealing with, infb.org. Our dispatch newsletter goes out every other week with policy-related information, so make sure you're on that mailing list. Anything else that I'm forgetting? I always can reach out to you all with questions on any of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Their contact information is on our website. Feel free to reach out to you. Anything I missed, guys? No? All right.
We'll be keeping an eye on summer study committees at the State House. Those go on between now and even November. The summer studies is kind of a misnomer. They often take place autumn after State Fair a lot of times.
Okay.
So we'll be participating in those, and again, just make sure you're voicing your opinions and your thoughts with your elected officials at the federal, the state, and the local level.
Yep.
And I would just say, similar, if you do come to an August recess, or if you can't make it to a meeting, we do take trips to DC, and we do take members, and I try to make those balance across the district or across the state. So if you're from a part of the state you couldn't get in front of your member of Congress, we'd love for you to join us in DC. It's, and kind of like you said, they're accessible and at the farm. They are, but DC is a place where anybody can go and have those same conversations. So we'd love to have them join us.
Yeah, raise your hand for those trips. Those are great trips as well. You do a great job with those. All right, thank you both. This was great. A great little touch base in the middle of the year about policy issues, but you guys are always on the move doing your thing, and we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So
Thank
you. If you enjoyed our conversation today, make sure to subscribe to The Breakdown with INFB, and even rate and review us to let us know how we're doing. For more information, visit www.infb.org/podcast.